Hey YouTube, Kira Qualia here, bringing you all my Cardfight Vanguard Artillery Dragon Empire deck profile for May 2021. Continuing off with the decks from the Genesis of the Five Greats booster pack, we're going with the Artillery deck. This focuses more on the playstyle of, I would say, the original Narukami, Tachikaze, and Kagero clans from Dragon Empire, basically going for a more retire aspect while still benefiting from, gaining additional rear guards as well with all of these different units in the deck, with our main focus being heavy artillery of Dust Storm Eugene and its retire and Persona Ride playstyle, and building up the soul for being able to call out other additional rear guards with the help of the grade 1 and 2 ride targets from the ride deck. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So starting off with the ride deck, we do have a specific lineup for it. We run for our starter a double gun of Duststorm Bart, just having the standard when rode upon, if you went second, draw a card ability. And for the grade 1, we have gunning of Duststorm Nigel. When this card is rode upon by Cataclysmic Bullet of Duststorm Rando, you soul charge 1. So you need a Soul Blast 5 for Eugene, so this soul charging definitely does help for that setup. And when your opponent's rear guard is retired during your main phase, you can counterblast 1 and retire this unit to choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. It's a rear guard only ability, so if you run additional copies of it in the main deck, you can have that additional option for retiring more and more cards. For the grade 2, we run 1 Cataclysmic Bullet of Duststorm Randor. When rode upon by heavy artillery of Duststorm Eugene, you draw a card and choose up to 1 card from your drop zone and put into your soul. So the draw power is very, very nice, but also being able to just set up more in the soul, giving you 2 soul charges alone with Nigel and Randor gives you the 5 needed to then use the final ride target for the deck, which is Eugene. Having this setup means you'll have your playstyle going into each one of these cards right when you go into Eugene, giving you more and more setup for this card. So this is the standard ride target setup for the deck. With our main go-to grade 3, which we'll go over now, is the heavy artillery of Duststorm Eugene. We have the 1 in the ride deck, so the additional 3 will be in the actual main deck. It's a once per turn, rest 2 rear guards, choose one of your opponent's rear guards, retire it, and this unit gets plus 10,000 until end of turn. So the plus power works very, very nice with the Persona Ride. If you go into another Eugene, not only will that set up more soul for you to use for the second ability, which is a once per turn on Vanguard. If your opponent's rear guard was retired this turn, Soul Blast 5, look at the same number of cards from the top of your deck up to the number of your opponent's open rear guards and choose any number of units from among them and call them to rear and put the rest into your soul. So with that, you have soul buildup for using this card again next turn if you were to ride again. Also giving you the option to retire by resting your rear guards means you will use them as the resource for this card, but then you can easily make them up with the Soul Blast 5, which is then set up as well with the ride chain for the ride deck as well, going into each card accordingly, setting up that soul as well, and then giving you the Soul Blast for the superior call. For the backup, grade 3, I wanted to go more off of the play of, cards that can build up soul. So also running 4 Penetrate Dragon Trabosh. On rear, when your Vanguard attacks, if your opponent has 2 or less rear guards, put this unit into your soul, choose one of your Vanguards, and it gets critical plus 1. This card works very, very well with Eugene, just being able to, 1, build up your soul charge with this card alone, giving Eugene an extra critical to go with its Persona Ride plus 10,000 power, and its Rest 2 rear guards retire power, giving you more cards to call out, and that pressure alone, 33,000 with Eugene, and the additional critical. If you just drive check another critical, that's the pressure that Trabosh just definitely does help with in many of the different Dragon Empire decks altogether. And that is it for the grade 3s. We'll now move on to the grade 2s. I run 4 Drag Gritter Debox. When this unit is placed on rear, you counterblast 2 and then soul charge 1 for this card to choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it. So it builds up the soul charge as well. Not taking the soul blast as much for the fact that Eugene doesn't use any counterblasts, so you can use the majority of them for your Debox here, setting up more soul for this card while also retiring more of your opponent's rear guards, giving you more options to call out with your Eugene onto the field. So this card is more of when it's placed on rear, so it's not a good Vanguard ride target, but you're only going to use the ride deck for the majority of your plays anyway, because that sets up your main go-to into one with Eugene altogether as well. So 4 debuffs just helps for the soul charge power, and just one of the other counterblasting in the deck will be done by your Drag Gritter Alwithith. With this one, when placed on rear, you can counterblast 1 and soul blast 1, choose one of your opponent's grade 2 or greater rear guards, and retire it. So if you don't use the Eugene, or you have all the soul needed for Eugene, it combos well with the box providing the basic power for the soul charge, and then relying on Owlith for the counterblast and the soul blast, which was built up with your debuffs. It's pretty counterblast heavy, this deck, but you can at least use those resources to clear out your opponent's rear guards even more, giving you more cards to call out with your Eugene. Like I said, for more and more open rear guards they have, and then the rest can go into the soul, building it up again for the next turn. And then to finish off the grade 2s, I also run 3 Stealth Rogue of Iron Blade Oshikumi on rearguard. When this unit attacks, if your opponent has 2 or less rearguards, this unit gets plus 5,000 till end of battle. So it's just a 15,000k attacker against your opponent, which is pretty good for the fact that you're going to be clearing out a lot of their rearguards with all of the previous cards we spoke of. You have the critical pressure with Trabosh, the clear out power with Eugene, and then more of the retire power with Owlith and also Debox, giving you more and more retire, but also soul buildup for either Owlith or your Eugene to use. And then you can just rely on Oshikumi, not for so much any of the counterblasts or anything like that, but more of just the plus 5,000 power that it can do. And that is it for the grade 2s. We'll now move on to the grade 1s. Our starter, Sentinel of choice is still Twin Buckler Dragon. Just good because you will use hand resource a lot in this deck, and there's not much to recover the draw power alone aside from the Persona Ride, and then just going off of your options for your Eugene setup for rear guards to call, but for hand options, if you have less and less hand, relying on Twin Buckler Dragon for the guard. Once again, going off of the fact that if you have 2 or more cards in hand, you choose a card from your hand, discard it, but as long as you have the 2 in your hand, if you guard against your opponent and just have 1 more Sentinel in your hand, you don't have to discard it, saving it again for another guard against your opponent for their bigger attacks on your opponent's turn. For more of the grade 1 setup, with the main focus being a retire deck, I still run 4 Stealth Fiend Shigun Manago with this one. When your opponent's rearguard is retired during your main phase, retire this unit, look at the top card of your deck, and you may call that unit from among them to rear if you did not put that card into your soul. So going off of Eugene plays again with this card. If you don't call out the card, or if you choose not to, you can at least put it into the soul of Eugene, building up more and then potentially calling out more using this card along with just that setup when your opponent's rearguard is retired. So with that option for the retire, as long as this card is set up on the field, it can provide more deck thinning options depending on what you reveal with this card, and just a good boost for some of the other grade 2s we mentioned of already, getting the plus power on their own, but also just being an 8k power to boost against them also. I also run, or potentially do want to run, the 4 Stealth Dragon Tencha Stead. I have the 1 Gunning of Duststorm Nigel, which is good for the retire power. If you don't have the Tencha Stead, you can always put in Nigels until you get more and more of this card. It's just good for the Persona Ride search power. When the attack it boosted hits, you counterblast 1 and retire this unit. And also choose one of your vanguards, search your deck for up to 1, and reveal it and put it into your hand. So just being able to search out a Eugene for you to Persona Ride with come the next turn, it's really, really good for that search power. Like I said before, if you don't have Tencha Steeds, you can substitute in Nigels for it. But as long as you have a couple, you can always put in more and more numbers as you get them, and then take out the additional numbers for Nigel. Remember, one of the Nigels will be in your ride deck, so you'll at least have to have one of the Tencha Steads for the final spot in the deck. And that is it for the grade 1s. We already went over the starter with the ride deck. It's definitely going to take some getting used to that. But for the trigger lineup, I'm going with the 7 critical, 4 Blaze Maiden Zone, and 3 Conduct Spark Dragon. Saving room for the over trigger, as always. So just like the pressure with this card, and the fact that Trabosh also provides that additional critical pressure, can hit for some pretty big numbers against your opponent, and then just deal 3 damage if they no guard against your Vanguard attack. And the over trigger with the restand power just means more and more pressure against your opponent. So once per turn for Eugene, but just that overall trigger buildup is great for the multiple attacks. For the next trigger, I'm also running 4 of the draw, which is Rushing Dragonsteel Delifo. I wanted to choose more of the Tachikaze feel for the deck. That's why I decided to go with these draws for this lineup. And the same with the heal trigger, which my heal trigger of choice is White Light Dragon Parasoleil. nice. It's just, like I said, more of an original Dragon Empire feel with these cards. We have more of a mystical feel with the overdress cards. So that's why I decided to stick with those triggers for that deck. But this one definitely feels like you use more of the, ancient kind of world play cards, and all of them differ for that. And then lastly, for the over trigger, I still don't have the Dragon Empire one. It was the one I couldn't pull, sadly. So until you get them, you can always substitute in the one they provide with the start decks, which is Spiritual King of Determination. I'll bury out just a 100 million power boost and then an additional 100 million power boost as well for the additional skill when you drive check it. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoy the video. It's definitely a more rogue deck for the new overdress format, but still definitely one if you are missing the old playstyle for Kagero, Tachikaze, Narukami, you name it. This deck is definitely one to consider with just all the different retire power it has at its disposal. And until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Qualia out.